caveat of I didn't write the book in 2020 or about 2020 or about a pandemic. I've been writing the book since 2018, and the ideas behind it come from much earlier. I often say it took about 2.5 years to write, but 2.5 decades in the making. And 2020 was simply an incredible accelerant and catalyst for some of these ideas. But even prior to 2020, I was really concerned by what I was seeing as a futurist, as an advisor, as a human being around our relationship to change and the increasing pace of change. The pace of change has never been as fast as it is today, and yet it is likely to never again be this slow. And if you pause for a minute and just let that sink in, it's kind of exciting and it's a little bit terrifying. If we think about the first industrial revolution, it took about 100 years to really take root. That's 5 generations. The fourth industrial revolution, if that's what we want to call what we're in now, 10, 20 years, it's happening fast. I had been looking previously at big picture shifts like climate, like automation, and getting very concerned about humans' relationship to it. Then the pandemic hit, and it was like, wow, this is much deeper and broader, just how we relate, not just to change in general, because there are many different kinds of change. We opt in, we love change that we opt into. We struggle with change we can't control, or we didn't predict, or we don't really see it as welcome or a good thing. And I think there's more of that coming, not less. And the future is more uncertain. It's more unpredictable. It's more unstable. And so that's where I get really excited about the message of the book, which is fundamentally uplifting in terms of we need to reshape our relationship to change to be fit for a world in flux, to be prepared for this sense of constant, sometimes relentless change, much of it which we can't control or we don't see coming. And how do we adapt to that, relate to that, move forward amidst that? So this question of, does it require a shock or a seismic change or a tragedy or something that just wakes you up bolt upright and you realize how badly you need to change or fix things or do things differently, whatever. The book took 2.5 years to write, but it was 2.5 decades in the making. I think back then when I was in college and both of my parents died completely unexpectedly, completely out of the blue. It was my first brush with death, my first funeral, any of that. It was traumatic and it flipped my world upside down. But those are the 2.5 decades since. Back then, I never would have imagined that I would write a book about it, or certainly not this kind of book, I guess you could say. But I want to be really clear that in the 2.5 decades since, as I have looked at my own journey, but also observed, talked with, met with, researched many other people, many other organizations, many other cultures, taking a very broad landscape, a broad snapshot of this, I can say that when you have a shock or that seismic, oftentimes you have no choice but to wake up and face that reality, no choice but to walk through that fire. But I'm very resistant to say that that is a prerequisite, so to speak. There are lots of ways, and I often joke, I'm like, doing it without tragedy is a lot more fun. I have yet to meet anyone who says that their relationship to change needs no help. So these concepts of the flux mindset, a flux deficit, what I like to call your flux baseline, kind of what is your relationship to change? And I don't mean to be thinking about this from the position of like scarcity or that it's something bad about us. I want to be really clear. It's a very human thing. We struggle with change, and a world in flux teaches us just how much work and improvement we have to do. My book is not about change management. My book is about our relationship to change from the inside out and how it shapes and colors every strategy we make, every investment we make, every decision we make, but we don't talk about it that much. And so this notion of our relationship to change, most people in my experience have never really thought hard about it. And so there's this sense of, how do you approach change on average? Do you come from it from a place of hope or fear? Do you see uncertainty as dangerous, or do you tend to see it as like an adventure for your curiosity? What were you taught about these things growing up? And what's happening now is a lot of people, I would say young people in particular, but older people too, are realizing, gosh, the world I was told I should expect to live in doesn't really align with the world as I'm seeing it today. So the first step of that is this kind of, what is your flux baseline? And there's not a right or wrong answer. The first step is really getting to know, what kinds of change do you love? What kinds of change do you hate? Where do you need improvement? So if we zoom out and we think about flux and a flux mindset, and I talk about the 8 flux superpowers, this ability to create and curate your portfolio career is one of the 8. And it is very focused on the future of work, the now of work, how we're looking at our careers individually as well as organizationally. When I say portfolio career, I'm thinking about, how do we think about our careers? How do we shape them? How do we design them? How do we talk about them? What do we look for? How do we, master, if that's not too strong a word, our professional journey? And when I say portfolio, think about it as an artist might. What's in an artist's portfolio? Their best works of art, the things they're most proud of. Or an investor portfolio. What's in an investor's portfolio? A diversified set of investments designed, A, to diversify, and B, to mitigate risk. I am not looking at this through the lens just of jobs, or certainly not of quitting jobs or jumping jobs, not at all. I look at a portfolio. What goes into your portfolio is every single skill, role, responsibility, participation, membership, leadership of anything that you've ever been involved in that can produce value for society. So your portfolio includes your jobs. It includes side hustles and gigs. It includes volunteering. It includes parenting. It includes things you were paid or not paid for. It includes skills you're developing. It's a much more, it's a big bucket into which a lot goes in. But thus far, again, we focused on CVs that look a certain way. And this is sort of disaggregating your CV so that all of these different skills can go into the portfolio, and you can mix and match and blend them however you wish. And the people who have really good portfolios are those ones who curate them best. But then what it allows you to do is to continue layering on your career, which you may be in. If you're one role your whole life in an organization, you can still have a portfolio. So each and every person today, whether you're working or not, actually has a portfolio, even if you don't realize it. And that's really empowering. The key, the superpower you need to develop, though, is to be able to curate it, to shape it, to see what's in it and how it needs to be combined and recombined. Again, not to just be fit for the future of work, but fit for a world in flux, in which things are going to continue to change professionally, but also probably personally in terms of your priorities, etc. Yes, organizations can have a flux mindset. It's typically part of your organizational culture. I've had lots of conversations recently about how a flux mindset, or how your fluxiness, lots of fun riffs on the word, how that relates to organizational values, and whether there needs to be a sort of additional value put in there, which is simply, it goes beyond nimbleness and agility. It's just this sense of fluxiness and being okay, not knowing, being okay, not being able to control, being okay. So much of what I'm talking about is in some ways antithetical to how we think about organizations. And I'm totally okay with that. One of the hallmarks of a flux mindset is the ability to hold paradox, and this ability to say, yes, we see these are the filters through which we make decisions today. We see how many of them are actually broken or cracked or fraying. They're not fit for the world we live in. But as I like to say, they have a really long tail. We're still filtering our decisions through them. We need to be able to make that transition. And I think we're in the early stages of transitioning to a new kind of script, again, at the organizational level as well. And I don't think it happens all at once. And I don't think it's all pretty or easy or any of that. But that's part of what I get really excited about helping people, and also though companies, governments, think tanks, nonprofits, any kind of organization navigate as well. So just, I wanted to put that out there. I realize it's sort of a separate answer, but it frames a lot of this. Now, coming to the I people, T people, pi people, X people, the whole alphabet at some point, I suppose, you're absolutely right. This world in flux is much better suited, not just for pi and X-shaped people and vice versa, that pi-shaped and X-shaped people are better fit for a world in flux, but I think more importantly, casting forward, we need to recognize that when the pace of change and the things changing are going so quickly, if you will, you might be really good at doing one thing and intend to do that for the rest of your life. That's good luck. That's not something you necessarily are going to get to control. And there's another superpower that we don't need to go too far into, but so much of this is also about our relationship to control and how we desperately, urgently want to be able to predict and control things. And that's human nature. But the more we try to do that, more and more I see, the more miserable we make ourselves and the worse our decisions over time. So back to the X and pi shaped people, these are the people who are able to say, it's time for me to level up and get a new skill. I've been using these 10 skills for the last many years. They're good skills, valuable. I need to mix them up in different ways. I'm looking on the horizon and I'm seeing something, a shift happening where there's not enough people who know about topic X, or there's a blind spot we're going to encounter. We need to be talking to this other stakeholder set. I mean, there are all kinds of ways this plays out, but pi-shaped people and X-shaped people, when there's the depth and the breadth, are much better able to kind of see that bigger picture, see where they need to grow into. And I think, maybe stating the obvious, there's a natural link here with the notion of lifelong learning, and that we will never stop upskilling and reskilling and whatever you want to call it. But a world in flux, on the one hand, will force us to do that. There's no question that there will be a certain a certain amount of this that is nudging that, we don't get to control. But those that can be really joyful about their professional future are those who actually can proactively lean into this and say, in order to be flux ready, future forward, et cetera, I need to gain new skills. I need to go beyond my comfort zone. I need to, even if I don't have all the answers, I need to start peeling back the layers of the onion, make myself a little bit uncomfortable, but grow into new roles that are actually going to map better with the future. And I think that's something that every professional realizes consciously or subconsciously. I think we start getting, there's a lot of latent anxiety. Well, there's a lot of overt anxiety. There's also a lot of latent anxiety. What do I do? How do I move forward? And rather than letting that fester, this is actually a flux mindset, is how you turn that anxiety actually into action and into proactivity and into taking control. You can't control the future, but you can control whether you contribute to a future you'd like to see, which I hope includes your own professional well-being, success, contribution to society. In some cases, it's outright contrarian. It is antithetical. And it's funny, Raju, you'll appreciate this. I'm generally, fairly conflict averse. I don't like to provoke arguments. I want to make people happy. I want to help everyone feel and be their best. But I've gotten into a lot of debates about these superpowers, and I've never felt more joyful to actually have an honest, open-hearted, open-minded debate about these things, because everything from, I say run slower, society says run faster. I say portfolio career, they say career path. What I'm not saying though, and just as an example, run faster versus run slower. I'm not saying stop, be lazy, do nothing. I'm saying run. I'm just saying run at a more sustainable pace that you can actually see what's happening and process and focus on what really matters. I'm saying be deliberate about your career, just shape it in a different way with a different framing, a different container. I wish we could all kind of just become comfortable with that change. That's what I'm trying to help people do. And we're really in this world now, there is no steady state. there is no end game. There is just more change. And the fact that more the rule than the exception moving forward, I think, is that by the time you've managed to adapt or react or respond to one change, certainly something else will have changed. The now normal is whatever's changing now, the next normal, whatever's coming around the corner, and the never normal, self-explanatory. So if we think about our mindset as a kind of muscle, your brain muscle, that we're having to realize that we have this muscle, which I think not everyone does on day one, but then that it's something we can strengthen and have to strengthen and need to strengthen. And the way you strengthen any muscle is through daily practice. So this sense of what I'm describing is not kind of one and done. It is not a quick fix. And imagine if we could do that comfortably. What a world we could live in. We really resist the change we can't control, the change that blindsides us, the change that goes against our expectations, the change that delays our plans or disrupts them entirely. That's the kind of change we need to develop this muscle for. That's the kind of change there is more, not less of moving forward. And that's the kind of change that I get really excited about. I mean, from that perspective, we're living in this amazing time in which a lot of people didn't get an opportunity, so to speak, like we have today, to actually level up and to buckle up and to, lean into this flux.